I used to work in acrylic paint a lot until, I'd say it was about 2 or 3 years ago. And then I started working in oil, and from then on I haven't looked back really. Oil is just a nicer medium to work with. It seems that it stays wet all the time, and you can work back into it.
But you also work in a lot of different styles, like you're working there with pencils. Look at some of the earlier work, portraiture, and then you have the abstract art and the representational art. Why does the style keep changing?
Well, the style keeps changing because other artists keep interesting me, really. I go down to the library in college or whatever, and I read a book or look at a magazine and flick through it. I just want to loosen my style and not stick to one particular one. Dance is another interest of mine, and I like to get out and do it as often as possible. So I decided to take this hobby and combine it with art. I just danced around, I suppose, in my own bedroom or whatever. So I took this further and I videotaped myself doing different dance sequences and transferred them onto a series of acetates and sometimes even little movie flick books, and then transferred that onto a canvas, which I'll use in a loose style and which I combined with colour and drawing in the way that I wanted, I suppose.
Yeah.
In terms of line and colour, the drawing is one of my strong elements in art, and I always believe that you have to be well able to draw both linear and tonally to perfect what you can do with colour. I just tried a portrait study because portraits I consider to be my speciality, I suppose. I started working with linear lines of colour. The lines were static, they were straight, or they were going vertical or horizontal, and they're all different lines of colour just joining up together to make this image.
Well, would you use a camera whenever you go out around the country or whenever you're meeting with people to get an image to work from?
Mostly I would, yes. Photography, I've always been taking pictures and using pictures in my work. I find them really far more interesting to work with than maybe just life. And some people don't like the idea of using photographs, but I think it's a help. You can do so much more with the photograph nowadays on computers and distorting images and whatnot. You'd be surprised how much cameras and computers can teach you in ways of seeing the world.
I personally think your work is amazing. But where do you want to go in the future?
In the future? That's a lot to think about, really. But first of all, I have to get my degree, hopefully, and maybe then on to go and do a master's. But with my degree next year, I hope to develop my style more. I'd love to work in the portrait, if there is a portrait industry, more. And if I could get a professional job as a portrait artist, it would just be a dream of mine, because it's something I've always wanted to do. It's what keeps me going. It's the subject of portraiture. It'll never fade for me, and that's mostly what I hope to do, really.
I brought John to this house in the grounds of Ashford Castle. Fans of The Quiet Man might recognise it as the home of the Squire Danaher.
John, this is it, the Danaher house. What do you think?
Very, very impressive property. Lovely, lovely house.
Really old traditional farmhouse, and was used in The Quiet Man movie. And the only change is this porch in the front. As a painting, how do you think you're going to handle it?
I don't know. I mean, it's going to be intriguing. I quite enjoyed painting when I was at school, and I quite like what I call still life.
You see, in a way, John, this is a bit like a still life. You know, because we're not going to paint the whole house, we're just painting the corner here.
Yeah. Well, if I get an impression, I'll be very happy. If it vaguely resembles it, I'll be more than happy, I can assure you.
But before we do anything, John, I have to get a sketch done.
OK.
So, I'll show you where to start. We're going to take that porchway and just... That's the sketch, and quite a nice sky. What do you think of it, John?
Well, there's a lot going on, but I mean, in parts, for example, here I've just scribbled. I don't know whether that's enough, but you tell me.
Yeah. Well, you say scribbling, and that's very true, because at the end of the day, we can't paint every leaf and every flower that's out there. We have to do an impression of what we're looking at. Otherwise, it would be too fussy.
Shall we attack the trees next?
Attack the trees is the very thing we're going to do. And if you look up there, you can see that, you know, we have various tones of green. In the trees themselves, we have a light green, a mid-tone green, and a dark green.
Now, it's interesting you say that, you see, because that's you, the artist, looking at them. I would have walked past those trees and say, oh, those are just trees, right? But you're absolutely right, there are three distinct shades there.
Yeah. And the other thing you have to look for is the ivy. the ivy is lighter than the background trees.
Yes.
You see this area here, we're going to keep this a lot lighter than the trees behind.
Yeah.
But we'll start with this tree here, and I've mixed a wash of Windsor yellow and a tiny bit of Windsor blue, and this is the number 8 brush.
Now, what I'm going to be interested to discover is how you actually depict, using that brush, or a brush, you make those trees look as though they have leaves, because whenever I paint trees, it's just one mass of green. I can't get the detail out. So how do you set about that?
Well, looking up there, you can see that the green has a lot of diffused, darker colour running through it. So we'll start with the lighter wash. And if you turn the brush on its side, you see the way I'm holding it down parallel to the paper?
Yeah.
And taking the excess wash off the brush first of all. That's the broad wash. Now, with the brush half loaded, we can come up to the top. And you can see there, you're getting a broken outline.
Yeah.
Hold it over the top the way I'm holding it there.
Yeah.
And then you can
So I
bring
wouldn't
it down.
naturally do that either. And it's this way.
Yeah, pulling from the outside in. Keep the brush right down flat against the paper.
Yeah.
And then you'll get a broken line. Don't fill all the spaces, because you can see that there are some bits of sky coming through the trees.
Sure. Yeah, is that the idea?
That's fine. Yeah. But don't come below this area here now.
Sure.
Let me give you the darker colour, because the shadows will be in the areas of the tree where the sunlight is not getting in or the direct light is not getting in. So that will be a mid-tone green. And just by setting that in on the underside of some of that foliage, watch the foliage grow. You see, you were talking about leaf detail.
Yeah.
If the underlying wash is still damp, the new wash that's coming on will bleed through it.
Yeah. Which it's doing precisely.
You see the foliage there?
Yeah.
So I want you to do that on the underside of that area.
I got the impression we had to paint every flipping leaf individually.
We'll be here all month.
Exactly. So again, close the paper again.
Keep it up partially over the first wash so that it bleeds through that, and pull down. Now set a few little bits in there, but don't fill all of that light green. Pulling all the time, don't just dab, sort of drag it.
Yeah, so I was dabbing there, wasn't I?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Now you see what's happening there right away?
Yeah. My tree is growing before my very eyes, isn't it? Yeah. That's brilliant, Dermot. Fantastic.
You want to bring that down around the broken edge of the ivy bush.
Yeah.
So that you leave a broken edge for that ivy bush to grow into the darker foliage behind. Now I'm going to give you a darker one here, because in that tree there's no light getting into the foliage at all. That's a mixture of French ultramarine and a little bit of light red. Now this is quite dark. Now I want to set this in very quickly, because that's drying, and if it dries then it won't spread at all. So I'm just setting in some there and some there.
Very impressive. Very impressive. Because you're capturing it.
Yeah.
But perfectly.
After a year or two, John, if you want to change these techniques and use your own, you're quite free to do that.
Yeah, when I've got my own arts program.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, there we go. What do you reckon?
I think it's a good job, John. And you can see that we have a lot of varying tones of the light green and the dark green.
Yeah.
But I've got you to emphasise the darkness around the outline of the building, because that will make the building stand forward.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you carry the light colour right down to where it meets the roof, then there's no real contrast between the light roof and the dark foliage beyond. Well, that's the next thing we're going to tackle. And we're using a mixture here of French ultramarine with a little bit of light red and crimson. And this gives us a very bluish grey. Now I'll try this first of all. It may need to be thinned down a bit. That's a bit too dark. With the bit of light on the roof, it tends to be lighter rather than darker. So to lighten that, you would just use a bit of water, and that lightens it out quite a bit.
Sure.
So whenever you're painting that, keep the brush coming, following the contour of the roof. As it falls down, you pull the brush stroke down, so that at least if you leave any little bits of white, it's going to replicate the fall of the roof itself.
Good.
So off you go.
Okay.
You see the way the colours that we've mixed are separating, and you have some blue and slightly redder colour here, and it's giving the character of the slates themselves.
So that's due to the mixture you've given me, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll use the same colour again, and we'll move up to this bigger roof here, this one right in front of us.
Now, why has it got those different colours, do you think? Well, is that damp, or is it, what is it?
It's years and years of water running down the roof.
Yeah.
And there's certain things starting to grow on it. There's a bit of fungus on it there and different things.
Yeah.
And it's just staining, aging.
Yeah. Which we're going to have to depict, aren't we, somehow or other?
Yeah. Well, that's what we do. We just use varying colours.
Yeah.
and different colours within the wash
And let it just run.
to give us that character.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have the painting surface at about 15 degrees from the horizontal, which is allowing the washes to flow towards us.
Ah.
So you're getting that running as well.
So even that's important. I didn't
Yeah.
realise that, of course.
Yeah.